terrarium is not just a glass box. It is a small, closed micro-ecosystem where every element must function properly. And it all starts with the soil. When setting up a terrarium for a Brachypelma albiceps, many people make one basic mistake. They prepare the substrate incorrectly. Too much moisture, not enough structure, or a substrate that collapses and does not hold its shape. Today, I will show you how to properly prepare a mixture that is stable, dry, and safe in the long term. I will explain why the ratio is important, how it affects the stability of the substrate, and how to make this mixture a solid base that will hold its shape and allow the terrarium to look natural. In the video, you can see all the materials that we will use to set up this ecosystem. Here are the different types of soil that will form the base of the terrarium and provide a stable, natural base. We will also add a succulent plant to visually complete the setup and create a more natural, dry habitat. Here is a piece of wood that will serve as a structural element and add height to the terrarium. As the main hiding place, we will use a cow skull, which will be both functional and an aesthetically striking element. Once we have everything ready, we can start setting up and designing the final look of the terrarium. This is my terrarium. It is a very cheap model, and you can tell. It is 30 centimeters wide, 12 centimeters high, and 20 centimeters deep. It has small ventilation holes and a simple closure with a kind of lock, and there are rubber bands along the edges for sealing. Honestly, I bought it because it was affordable. And in this video, I want to show that it is possible to make a decent terrarium even on a low budget. But yet, this closure is quite awkward, and it is quite difficult to open and close. This is one of the things that you quickly start to regret with cheaper models. In terms of size, this is the minimum acceptable dimension, suitable mainly for puppies or adult males. For an adult female, this terrarium would already be too small. Now let's see how to turn such a basic and cheap terrarium into the most functional and tidy habitat possible. Now I add the terra basis, which is the main part of the base. This soil serves as the basic structure of the entire terrarium. It gives volume, stability, and allows the base to hold its shape. Its advantage is that it is not too light, so it does not collapse immediately. But at the same time, it is not too compacted to become hard like concrete. It helps regulate the moisture in the lower layers, while the surface remains drier. This is important for a stable environment and preventing mold. It also allows us to form slight slopes or consolidate the area around the hiding place to keep everything in place. In short, the terra basis is the supporting layer on which the entire terrarium is based. Now I mix terra basis with coconut fiber. Coconut fiber has several important functions. The first is that it improves the structure of the substrate. The soil becomes more airy and less compacted. This means better air flow through the lower layers and less chance of moisture retention. Another important thing is binding. Coconut acts as a natural reinforcement, which helps the substrate not to collapse too quickly and to maintain its shape when it is compacted. In addition, the fibers regulate moisture. They do not make the substrate wet, but allow a more even distribution of moisture inside, while the surface can remain dry. This combination creates a stable, compact, and at the same time airy base, which is key for a long-term functional terrarium. How to have a sufficiently humid terrarium without the substrate becoming too wet. This is one of the things that many people misunderstand. At the end of the video, we will talk about something very important. Don't miss it because it could kill your tarantula. Before we continue, it is very important to mention the thickness of the substrate. The soil needs to be about 10 to 12 centimeters thick for the terrarium to function properly. We have 10 centimeters here, which is the lower limit, but still enough for a stable base. This thickness is important because it provides good floor structure, shock absorption, and decoration stability. If a layer is too thin, the base will collapse quickly, hiding places will become unstable, and there will not be enough insulation between the surface and the layers below. Now, we will add a plant, a succulent. It looks very nice visually and makes the setup more natural. However, I must emphasize that this is not always advisable. With terrestrial tarantulas, it can happen that they push the plant out while digging or moving the substrate. They can undermine it, damage the roots, or completely bury it. In addition, succulents need a slightly different watering regime than the terrarium itself. So you have to be careful not to increase the humidity too much because of the plant. Here we use it mainly as an aesthetic element, but it is always important to keep in mind that functionality comes before appearance. In the following, we will talk about sand and its role in the substrate, why we add it, how much we use, and how it affects the stability of the entire terrarium. Now for the sand. In this case, we used yellow sand, but it is important to say that we did not mix it deeply into the substrate, but added it mainly on top for the sake of appearance. This layer creates a more natural, dry, and contrasting look of the terrarium. Visually, it gives the impression of a semi-dry, slightly sandy environment. But honestly, this is not necessary. The terrarium could function perfectly normally even without the top layer of sand. It is mainly an aesthetic addition, not a functional requirement. When choosing the color, we decided on yellowish sand because it better matches the natural habitat of the Brachypelma albiceps species. This tarantula comes from Mexico, mainly from more arid and semi-arid areas, where dry soil, sand, clay soil, and low vegetation prevail. The climate is warm, with pronounced dry periods. Of course, in nature, the substrate is not pure sand, but a mixture of mineral soil and fine sand. Therefore, we use sand sparingly and thoughtfully here as well. It is only important that the layer is not too thick, and that stable, solidified soil remains underneath. This way, we maintain the structure, safety, and natural appearance without unnecessary risk. Hiding place. In this case, we are using a cow skull, which will serve as the main structure in the terrarium. A hiding place is very important because it gives a sense of security and stability. The tarantula can retreat when it feels threatened, during molting, or when it wants peace. In addition to being functional, such an element also adds visual emphasis and makes the setup more interesting. However, it is interesting that in the end she did not use this hiding place at all. Instead, she chose another corner of the terrarium and arranged the space there in her own way. This clearly shows that we can prepare the ideal setup, but the animal will always make its own decisions. Therefore, it is important to offer a hiding place. Whether she will use it or not is up to her. At this point, you can add some branches or additional pieces of wood if you wish. These elements are not necessary, but they can improve the structure of the terrarium, add height, and make the setup more natural. The only important thing is that they are stable and well fixed so that they do not move. It is also highly recommended to add a water dish. Although I have found in some sources that this is not always necessary, I personally believe that constant access to fresh water is a safer and more responsible choice. The dish provides a stable source of hydration, while also helping to slightly regulate the humidity locally, without having to overwet the entire substrate. The key is that it is shallow, stable, and cleaned regularly. With this, the basic setup is complete, functional, stable, and adapted to the natural environment. And that's the final setup. As you can see, you don't need the most expensive equipment to make a good terrarium. You need the right thickness of the substrate, a stable structure, thoughtful decoration, and basic functional elements. Even with a cheaper terrarium, you can create a neat and safe habitat if you understand what you're doing. The most important thing is to always think long-term. Stability, safety, and the natural needs of the animals take precedence over appearance. In the following, we will talk about one of the most misunderstood topics: humidity in a terrarium. How to have enough humidity without the substrate becoming wet, and why this is key to long-term health. If you found the video useful, watch the sequel, where we go into even more technical details. And if you are interested in how to care for a tarantula, subscribe to the channel.